Hi, this is Todd Runstead, Editor-in-Chief of Functional Ingredients Magazine and Ingredia. I'm here today with Mark Blumenthal. He's the Executive Director of the American Botanical Council. Mark, I want to talk to you first about the history of the botanical trade. I don't know, dare we call it an industry. So the botanical trade has had its ups and downs, and in my mind, maybe it peaked in the 1990s when you had the big blockbusters, Echinacea and Ginkgo and St. John's wort. How are things today?
Well, you know, the botanical industry or the botanical community is old. Some people call it the world's second oldest profession because people have been trading. Thank you. Yeah, well, people have been trading botanicals and plant materials for centuries and for millennia. And so it has a long and really rich tradition. We're talking about now what we would call the history of the modern herbal movement or the modern herbal industry in the last 20 or 30 years. And you mentioned several herbs, ginkgo, I think you mentioned St. John's wort, echinacea. They really got big spikes in interest and sales volume and market consumption in the 1990s. And justifiably so in many cases because there was information going out, particularly St. John's wort, which had never been historically a very popular herb in North America. It had been used mostly in Western Europe. For depression and related kinds of disorders that are mood-related.
Mild to moderate depression.
Mild to moderate depression, that's right. And the research starting in the 1980s and 1990s was really compelling based on two different German extracts that were commercial-based extracts, particularly one company's in particular. And it was because of that information coming over and getting aired on the Barbara Walters show and promoted in a book by a Southern California psychiatrist that St. John's wort really made it as a herb du jour, if you will, and got very popular for several years.
And then did it kind of get its legs unfairly cut out from underneath?
Well, I think it began to subside as it became more accepted, and some of that kind of hype kind of was removed from it. We've never, at the American Botanical Council, as an independent nonprofit organization, we've never really believed in the idea of trying to hype in the market, the idea of selling an herb or over-promoting an herb in a way that is not sustainable. We believe that people should know about the legitimate uses of these herbs and other related products. We believe that people should know about the medical literature, the scientific and the clinical literature, much of which supports and substantiates some of the claims that are being made for these products, and that people should consider using them if they're going to, in a very responsible way, integrate it into their lifestyle with the approval, in many cases, of their primary healthcare practitioner, and this should be included in self-care and in healthcare in a responsible way based on the available scientific research. So we've never really liked the idea of the peaks and valleys, the spikes, because we like to see continued long-term sustainability, not only in the supply of these herbs, of course, but in the way that they're being communicated and consumed in the culture.
Well, so can botanicals really get their way better established into sort of the establishment healthcare paradigm in America, or is it just going to be relegated to the grassroots, as it were?
I think both. I mean, the grassroots has clearly embraced the idea of botanicals because this has always been folk medicine, i.e. the people's medicine. So by definition, it's always been part of the grassroots. The question is to what extent and how long will it take for mainstream conventional medicine and as well the integrative medicine practitioners, the people who are beginning to embrace and include so-called what heretofore was considered alternative medicine and alternative products, but now are being considered integrative because they're trying to integrate the best of what has been scientifically shown to be substantiated in the alternative field with conventional medicine. For example, I give a presentation that's 1 hour, hour and a half in length to various medical and pharmacy groups and sometimes industry groups related to the clinical studies on many of the popular herbs, and specifically not one or two leading studies that are high-profile studies that talks about the benefits or a negative outcome for an herb, But the systematic reviews and the meta-analyses, in other words, when they pool the data and you set certain inclusion criteria for the clinical trials, what do the data show? And for St. John's Wort, for example, in 2008, I think it's the last time we had a systematic review from the Cochrane collaboration, 2008 review of 29 clinical studies on St. John's Wort extract in use with patients with mild to moderate depression. Almost all but 2 of those studies, and they happen to be US-based studies, all but 2 of those studies showed a positive trend, superiority or equal superiority of the St. John's Wort over placebo, equal activity in many cases with the FDA or government-approved conventional pharmaceutical antidepressant drug, and a significantly lower level of adverse side effects. So that's when you pool all these studies. Yeah. So those people who take 1 or 2 high-profile studies that are published here in the United States on St. John's Wort, often, sometimes they were done on intractable patients who had not really responded to previous therapy at all. And in one case where Zoloft was used as a positive control and it too failed, which means you had a failed study, but it was promoted as a failed St. John's Wort study. If you look at all the data, including the European clinical trials, the data definitely shows benefit for St. John's Wort, and we can have this conversation about some other herbs as well. So what we're trying to do at the American Botanical Council is get people to realize that if you look at the totality of the published literature, very often it really shows a trending of support or positive outcomes, in some cases overwhelmingly positive, for some of the clinical benefits that some of these herbs are being promoted for.
Yeah. Are there issues that manufacturers need to know before they think about, maybe I'm going to start using a botanical in a product or come out with a line? You know, what are some of the issues that they should think about?
The primary issue with any manufacturer contemplating the use of any botanical ingredient, or for that matter, other types of ingredients, but with botanicals it's a little bit more challenging, is the authenticity of the material itself. Determining the proper identity of the herbal material, whether it's a powdered herb, whether it's an extract, depending on what kind of formulation it's going to go in, because there have been cases of accidental substitution and or adulteration, and in some cases, unfortunately, there are cases of intentional adulteration or substitution, or with cheaper materials, or ways to try to game the system with spiking certain marker compounds that look like they're promising for quality control or for therapeutic uses, and adding additional materials that will fool certain types of tests. So any manufacturer currently involved or contemplating getting involved with using botanical materials must ensure that they've got appropriate good manufacturing practices, which are required by law for this industry for the last 2 to 4 years, depending on the size of the company, as well as as part of that, the appropriate quality control processes and mechanisms and methods of analysis for all incoming botanical materials to ensure that they have the right authenticated material, and that material has not been in any way accidentally or intentionally cut, stretched, diluted, or somehow hyped up with some kind of cheaper material or other types of synthetic or natural materials that would give the consumer a false sense of value than what the product is really going to deliver.
Right. I'm sure this is just a fraction of many of the issues regarding botanicals in use, whether you're a consumer or healthcare practitioner, manufacturer or supplier. We've only touched the surface. Mark, I want to thank you for your time today.